you for tuning in to Beyond Explanation, Episode 3, Part 2. My name is Brandon, and I am joined by the Soulless Samurai, and we are here today to discuss Unidentified, Episode 4, Inside America's UFO Investigation. Definitely happy to continue our review of the fourth episode. We talked about the third episode not being our absolute favorite episode of the series thus far, so I'm happy that now we're getting to be able to move into completely fresh, completely new territory, and it really does bring another sense of excitement even within the same season.
Yes, a little closer to home, a little more closer to the present time-wise.
Yeah, these are, we're talking about East Coast UFOs now. We've left the West Coast, and we've moved ourselves over to the East Coast. We're off the coast
Biggie Smalls of aliens.
Off of the coast of Virginia Beach is where these events take place in the year of 2015. So we're talking more current in time, even. The events of the Nimitz in the first episode and the second episode are back in 2004, if memory serves, and off the West Coast, which with us being East Coasters, you know, it's nice to kind of have a comfortable distance from some of this stuff and not have to think about it being in your own backyard. But then now with it being something that is literally not that far from us, it's definitely something that makes you think even more or wonder even more about the validity of all this.
Yes, and not just close to us, but close to our nation's capital, close to the city of Philadelphia, close to the city of New York.
Yeah, we got a lot of nuclear power plants and all kinds of other fun stuff on the East Coast too.
For sure, and that's something that they hammered home in this episode too, was that a lot of these hotspots are around nuclear facilities.
Yeah, whether they be aircraft carriers or whether they be like actual nuclear power plants.
Testing facilities.
Yeah. The episode starts off with something a little different than what we've had up to this point, because up to this point we've had non-active duty Navy officers. And now we've had an actual active duty fighter pilot that is coming forward to talk to Lou and to talk to Commander Fravor from the first episode. And he's the pilot, for those who maybe don't know, that was the one that actually eyewitnessed the Nimitz incident and saw the Tic Tac UFO with his own eyes. He was the pilot that he didn't film the footage. That was the crew that went up after them, but they were the first ones to see it. Lou felt that it would be good to have him there when they interviewed the pilot, who was Lieutenant Ryan Graves, and he was a combat section lead and a fighter pilot and also an aerospace engineer. That's quite the repertoire.
Indeed, and he flew with the flight squad, the Red Rippers. Might be a band name.
Yeah, right. So he was stationed at the Naval Air Station Oceana off of Virginia Beach.
Mm-hmm.
So his squadron, the Red Rippers, were running training exercises when they started picking up anomalies on their radar. The pilots thought their new radar was malfunctioning until they saw one of the objects up close. Now, we're talking about the difference between an aircraft from 2004 and 2015.
True.
An entire generational difference now in aircraft, and they're still seeing these objects. So it's not anomalies that maybe just we were not up to par with catching. Now, even with newer, later, greater technology, we're still picking up the same stuff.
Yes, yeah, they're upgraded electronics from what we saw in the 2004 Nimitz encounter.
So we've talked about for 3 episodes now, pretty much, Tic Tacs. 40-foot flying Tic Tacs with no flight surfaces, no windows, no wings, no rotors, no nothing. Now,
nice, easy, fun image.
Yeah. So now we're talking off of the East Coast, and we're talking spheres with a cube inside.
I believe one of them described them as cubes with balls.
He did, but they did mention that the cube, sides of said cube touched the edges of the sphere. So it's not, when it says a cube with balls, I'm thinking like hanging off of the cube. Not so much the case. This is like encompassing the cube.
Like those truck balls.
Yeah. It would be
it's a weird alien flex.
Yeah. Think of it as like the thing that weighs the ball down inside those truck balls.
Oh man, going too deep into this metaphor.
Yeah, we got off on a tangent there. Entirely different craft. So instead of seeing Tic Tacs, you're now seeing these cubes and spheres that are flying around.
And Lieutenant Graves claimed that the Red Rippers encountered these every time they flew out.
Yes. So they kind of talk a little bit about whether maybe it would be like a drone or something of that nature. They weren't really sure. That could have been tested. But they said that it wasn't until it was in 2015 they started seeing the events. They started seeing them, as we mentioned, every single time somebody took off from the aircraft carrier in that group. And that the event actually occurred over a 8-week period. So it's every single time that someone's taking off and flying over this 8-week period, they're seeing these UFOs. They talked about they would have a 2-hour flight. They would come back and land. There'd be an hour break. And then the next group would go up and they would see the exact same stuff the last group saw.
Yeah, he said they were everywhere that they were. So they were either literally everywhere or they were following them.
At first, they weren't really sure what to make of it, as we had talked about on one of the last episodes, that when you're traveling at such a high rate of speed, just trying to focus on something would be really hard to do. And so they weren't sure if this was just like kind of anomalies, if you will, that they were seeing just because they were traveling at such high rates of speed, or if they were actual objects. And it wasn't until one of these cubes in the sphere actually split a formation and had these two fighters had to split off from each other because it actually flew right in between them. And they said that it was like less than 100 feet.
Yeah, I imagine that was really scary. And they had to file a mishap report.
Yeah, so after the event happened, that they almost got into a midair collision, they file an action report. And Commander Fravert specifically asked Lieutenant Graves if they had done anything about it. Did anybody even ask him about the action report? And he specifically said no. They had been seeing the objects for about 2 months. And then at that particular point in time, it was becoming so prevalent amongst the pilots that they started to collect videos and show them to each other and essentially like compare notes as to the different types of craft that they were seeing. And they basically had talked about it. There were like 3 different type of craft in total, but the main one that they were seeing was the cube and the sphere.
Yes, there was the disc-like craft, the tic-tac, and the square within a sphere.
So up to this point, we've talked about the Nimitz video, which was the tic-tac, and now they're starting to introduce 2 other additional videos. The one video is called Go Fast, which kind of looks like a small circular object traveling just over the surface of the water at an incredible speed. And then the third video is the gimbal video, which kind of looks a little bit more like a stereotypical UFO. There's kind of a circular kind of base to it. And then it has little kind of almost like a gyroscope, little parts that come off of each kind of middle portion of the sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And what it did that was so crazy, instead of traveling at high rates of speed, is it was able to, you know how you would take off in an airplane and your wings are flat so you have lift. It was able to do that vertically so that the wings were vertical to the ground and didn't lose altitude and it didn't lose velocity. So in a situation where you normally wouldn't have lift and wouldn't be able to fly due to how we know how planes work, it was able just to kind of hover there in this motion that wouldn't normally make sense for a plane to do.
Yeah, and Lieutenant Graves, who's an aerospace engineer, that blew his mind. He didn't understand how this thing stayed in the air.
Now, one of the interesting things is he talks about how the Lieutenant Graves actually knew who he believed filmed the 2 videos, because there's actual audio over the 2 videos that you can hear the guys who captured the video kind of talking to each other over top of it. And he said he recognized the voices right away.
Mm-hmm.
So he also kind of started to shed some more light on the videos, saying that they were actually filmed a few weeks apart from one another off of the coast of Jacksonville, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And that
from the USS Theodore Roosevelt.
Yes. And he was actually starting to give more detail about the videos that weren't even in the videos, which I thought was really interesting. So in the gimbal video, which was the one where it's kind of like a sideways levitating, if you will.
Yeah, we basically only see the craft flying and then rotating.
Yeah, and he said that video kind of picks up at the very end almost. That before that happened, before they hit record, if you will, there was like a fleet of 5 craft that were smaller that were in front of the craft that you see on the gimbal video, and that they had kind of moved out of frame and kind of gone away. And then that's when they started to record, and then they saw the gimbal craft. So it's
right, and the smaller crafts Lieutenant Graves was more familiar with. They were the crafts that him and his squad were used to seeing, and he drew up a little doodle showing the formation that these craft were in, and it basically like the flying V from the Mighty Ducks, and then the craft that you see in the gimbal footage was behind that.
Yeah, much like the knuckle puck, it would levitate on its side.
Yeah. Triple deked us.
That's right. They kind of talk about the different videos, the gimbal video with Lieutenant Graves, and they talk about the Go Fast video. He mentions about he knows the people that he believes were kind of doing the voiceovers for that. One of the interesting things about it was they had asked him if there was anyone that he could call or contact that had experienced the same things that he had experienced. And he said that he knew at least 50 to 60 other people that he could call that had similar incidents to himself and would attest to the fact that they had similar incidents.
Yeah, that's a lot of corroborating witnesses.
So to me, one of the crazier moments of the episode was when they were talking about that they were at one point, this carrier battle group was deployed to the Arabian Gulf. And when they left, and the entire time that they were traveling there, they didn't see the UFOs. But then once they got there and started actually doing maneuvers and taking off and, flying around, they saw them again.
Yep, right back to the same old, same old.
So they didn't know if the UFOs had followed them from the Jacksonville area to the Arabian Gulf, or whether they just are everywhere.
Yeah, and at that point, he even mentions that maybe these are next generation Russian drones.
Lieutenant Graves mentions that he doesn't know if this would be like Russian drones that maybe we don't know about, or maybe it would be something that another country has developed that we have fallen behind to.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. Air Force actually tried to make a real-life flying saucer. They commissioned a Canadian company to try to build a flying saucer between 1956 and I believe the project ended in 1961. And it went by the name Project 1794. It was supposed to reach a top speed of between Mach 3 and 4, a ceiling of 1,000 nautical miles. And if the plans followed through, it would have been able to spin through the Earth's stratosphere at about 2,600 miles per hour. And the cost at the time was roughly $26.6 million.
Wow.
And they supposedly made this prototype, and then funding got cut, and nobody knows what happened to this prototype. So it makes you wonder, this is a project that was declassified, but that was in let's say roughly 1960. And we're talking 70 years later. What technology do they possibly have? Do other agencies possibly have? And I think that's Steve Justice's argument as well, that he seems more of the mind that it's a earthly adversary and technology that we're falling behind on.
Yeah, Steve Justice is the guy from Lockheed Martin that's kind of in the To the Stars Academy group. And they get into a discussion with him a little bit more towards the end of the episode about that. And it's tough when you have, because there's projects out there and things that we don't know about. And it almost makes you wonder if that was one of the 9 craft that Bob Lazar ended up running into in the 80s. But
very well could be.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you have these programs out there to engineer stuff like this, and I mean, I think Chris Mellon had said it in one of the past episodes, how cool would it be if it really was American? Like Bob Lazar says when he rolled into the place where he was working and he saw the UFO for the first time and it had an American flag sticker on it. Mm-hmm. Like, oh man, this is awesome. It totally makes sense now. Like, we've had this all along. Of course, that would be great to think that that would be on our side, but it doesn't necessarily seem like that's the case. And if it's not on our side, is it on another country's side or is it on no one's side?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what they start to get into with the end of the episode. They mentioned briefly about how the pilots were calling them Foo Fighters to each other.
Yeah, that was a term used by Allied aircraft pilots in World War II to describe various UFOs or mysterious aerial phenomenon that were seen in the skies over both the European and Pacific theaters.
So they go back and start to talk up to the two pilots that they had back in the first episode, which was the retired Top Gun pilot and the retired commercial airliner pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And they were showing them, they already showed them the Nimitz videos, but they were showing them the Go Fast and the Gimbal video.
Mm-hmm.
Basically just reiterating what we already said, that it wasn't anything that they had ever seen before, that it didn't follow the laws of aerospace flight as they should know it to be.
Right, and it went really fast.
Yeah. Well, the Go Fast one, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. So Chris Mellon was able to get a meeting with lawmakers and was able to essentially take the video that Lou had done of Lieutenant Graves and the Go Fast and the Gimbal video and take those to actual lawmakers and start to have a closed door meeting with them. It seemed to be a continuation of a previous briefing because they had mentioned these people were aware of the Nimitz incident and had already been briefed on what happened with that, but they didn't know about the Go Fast or the gimbal footage.
Right. And one point that they try to make at this point in the episode is that Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon are trying to work within the establishment and follow the appropriate channels and trying to do everything to work with the government to look into this further.
And they make a big point of saying, like, okay, the biggest problem we're going to have on this is the alien angle. So we're not going to mention or speculate about aliens, okay?
I love the fact that To the Stars Academy swore that they would bring research and development to us, but they're really just knocking on the door of the U.S. government, begging them to figure it out for them.
Yeah, I mean, or yeah. I was gonna say maybe not, but yeah. I mean, honestly, that is kind of what they're doing because they don't seem to know what it is either. They just want them to actually take it seriously so they can look into it. They want the money so that they can then go ahead and try to figure out what this is.
Need that funding.
So the episode then goes to overview the history of politicians who were attempting to bring attention to this issue in the past. They mentioned that Gerald Ford had called for an investigation back in the 60s because a large amount of UFOs had been seen in his district. Also, Carl Sagan told the House Committee on Science and Aeronautics that investigating UFOs was absolutely a valid pursuit. And they had also mentioned Project Blue Book, which was J. Allen Hynek. That one basically went into them talking about wanting people to take his research seriously, basically.
Yes, and Project Blue Book was a U.S. government black budget project for a little while that he was head of.
And they basically looked into cases of UFOs, and it boiled down to him saying that there was about 20 cases that he felt like were fruitful to science and could maybe be investigated further, that we could possibly learn something from. But out of thousands upon thousands of reports, literally, he felt like 20 of them maybe were valid.
But important enough to make a stand.
So they mentioned at the meeting with Chris Mellon and the lawmakers went well, and that they had, again, already been briefed on the Nimitz incident, but that they were starting to see that this is a pattern and not just a single event that was happening just one time and that we couldn't explain.
Right.
So they bring in another pilot, Danny Aucoin. We're going to, for the purposes of the podcast, call him Lieutenant McLovin.
Mm-hmm. Lieutenant McLovin is a long list of people that have been interviewed by people that were interviewed before. And they're just continuing this pyramid scheme of interviewers.
It's like they feel like if you're in the same room as someone, like your credibility will rub off on them through osmosis.
Yeah, here's some credibility sauce.
Yes, and then therefore when you go to interview the next person, whatever you say with that person will therefore be that much more credible than whatever it would have been previously. So when Lieutenant McLovin and Lieutenant Graves are there and they're talking about the different footage, apparently Lieutenant McLovin used to work with Lieutenant Graves.
Mm-hmm.
They basically talk about how they, again, knew who the people were who were doing the voiceovers on the tape. And
right.
They kind of briefly mentioned that maybe this could have been faked and that the voiceovers could have just been placed on the tape and that they weren't actually on there to begin with and that they were just placed on there to lend dramatic effect.
Kind of like the To the Stars Academy logo that was stamped all over the videos that he kept showing them.
Problem I had with this segment was that with Lieutenant McLovin, they asked him at one point if there were any types of aircraft that we have right now that he's seen that are capable of such maneuvers as the Go Fast video and the gimbal video. And he says, while his right eye is twitching repeatedly, that he doesn't know how deep down that road he wants to go.
Yeah, that was a little disconcerting. He almost had that, like a Mark Zuckerberg does not compute, glitched out for a second over it.
I thought he was going to go Scanner Darkly there for a minute and have his head explode. Like,
yeah.
I don't know why, like when you're putting this together and literally you were just hitting home not even 10 minutes ago that, well, we're not going to talk about the whole alien thing. And now you're going to bring in somebody that's like, oh, we might have some craft, wink, 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 nudge, 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 that can do some stuff like this. Yeah. Literally after we spent a half an hour telling you, oh, this breaks all the known possibilities that we think the airplanes are capable of. Now you're going to be like, well, maybe we have some stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, Lieutenant Graves explained how lift works, and then this guy is like, maybe.
Yeah, I might have seen some shit. Maybe.
Sorry, I signed a non-disclosure agreement.
I guess. I don't. That to me, just these little things happen along the way that pull me out of the episode, and they happen to piss me off because it's like I just want this to be something that, even if it's not true, at least making an attempt to have it be a compelling argument. Don't keep throwing these gimmicky things in there that are like when you watch ghost hunter shows and they're like, oh my God, what was that? Commercial.
Yeah. And on that fear-mongering note, they definitely mentioned that it may be Russia or China. God forbid.
Yeah. Again, don't go down that road.
You don't want to go down that road.
So Lieutenant Graves talks about how, I guess, after the events of everything and them showing the videos, that his captain had shown up to watch the video, and he had kind of purposely hung out to see how he reacted to the video. And he said literally he spent 5 seconds watching it, went, huh, and then just left. To Lieutenant Graves, he said that kind of made him wonder if this maybe was something that the U.S. government was developing that few select people might know about, and that's why the captain wasn't at all interested.
Or just at that ranking level, they know not to look too far into things like that.
So it starts to move into Lou's discussion with Steve Justice from Lockheed Martin. Again, going over how our biggest concerns is that this might be another country, and we're just way behind in the technology race. Lou again states that he has kind of some sort of inside knowledge thanks to his time in ATIP, but he wishes he could disclose some things, but he can't disclose some things. This is 2 episodes in a row now that he's done this, where he's like, I have the answers to these questions, but I can't tell you the answers to these questions.
Yeah, he's totally dangling that carrot in front of us. And even when he's talking to Steve Justice, and Steve Justice kind of brushes it off like, oh, I know you can't talk about that. That's your business partner that decided to get in on this with you. I would hope that you can have some level of trust with him, or that he got into business with you knowing a decent amount of facts. That would make me feel better.
Well, again, how many times, and this is another example of what the show does, how many times are they going to have a reenacted conversation? Because that's what this was.
Yeah, very true.
It was not an actual sit-down conversation that they had for the first time. This was a reenactment of a conversation that they had for the purposes of the episode.
With original music by Tom DeLonge.
That's right. It's the new Blink-182. Get me back my Alkaline Trio, damn it. They mentioned that this is if this is another country, that we would be super behind in the technology. But if this is not another country, we're kind of all in the same boat. That we would all be facing the same problem of, holy crap, nobody knows what this is.
Yes, which makes you wonder what other countries are doing about this.
And then the episode starts to kind of end on an odd note, which is that they start to talk about hitting a wall with getting people to come forward and start to talk about their experiences. And they mention that they had this one particular gentleman who was one of the voices on the tape that you can hear, and he was about to come forward, but then he backed out. They didn't really give a lot of idea as to why this was occurring all of a sudden, other than the stereotypical ridicule, they're afraid of their job sort of deal.
Yeah, they're feeling intimidated. They did mention, too, that Lieutenant Graves was summoned to Congress to discuss his encounters.
Yep. Yeah, that was the next part we were going to get into. So the last little bit is that Lieutenant Graves essentially is brought in person now, not just the recordings of his videos. So we're bringing the pilot that saw the UFOs to Congress. They had a closed-door meeting, not on the books. They didn't write down what they talked about his events, what he saw. And he specifically said that he was not there to speculate or to draw conclusions, purely just to discuss the facts about what he saw and what he didn't see.
Yeah, and he mentions being extremely appreciative of what Lou Elizondo and Captain Fraser?
Commander Fravor.
Commander Fravor.
Yeah,
are doing for the disclosure.
So the meeting lasted about 90 minutes. And after the meeting, he met with Lou and basically said that the meeting had went well. And although they're interested and they're starting to recognize that this is possibly a problem, they don't really care about what might be causing the UFOs. Like, they don't have any drive to go figure out what's causing this.
But B, what if we invoke some demonic presence if we go investigate?
Well, hopefully the power of Christ will compel us. But it's...
he does live up there.
Yeah. I don't know if they talk about how we spend billions of dollars on not being surprised, essentially, when it comes to being attacked. But yet we don't want to know what these things are that are possibly surveilling our battle groups.
Yeah, and are obviously making your pilots uncomfortable.
Yeah, to the point where they feel like they're going to have a mid-air collision with one of these craft.
Yeah.
Like they talk about, they ended up doing the action report because they were really legitimately worried that they were just one of these things was going to run into them in the middle of the air.
Yeah, it almost seemed like a typical day-to-day thing. Like, oh, there's those things over there, those cubes with balls. And nobody really took it seriously until one split the pair of fighter jets.
Yep. We're getting ready to move into a whole nother realm of things again with the next episode.
Ooh, okay.
So
right now we've had encounters off the coast of San Diego.
Yep.
And off the coast of Mexico.
Yep.
Off the coast of Virginia.
Yep. And Jacksonville.
And Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. And also the Middle East.
Yes, and we're talking over several years. Between the 2004 and 2015 are these reported events.
Ah, right.
If you want to mention from episode 3 the accounts of the fishermen, which if you've already listened to the episode, you know I don't really care about. That was 11 different events over the course of multiple years.
Right.
All just off of the island of Guadalupe.
Correct, yeah.
So it's getting hard to not at least admit to the point that there are things out there that we don't know what they are as far as these objects. I still don't feel like at any point in time, other than the one time where they're like, we're not going to say aliens, that anybody has said that's what they think this is. Like, literally, they haven't mentioned that once on this show.
Yeah, that's true.
They have only ever said drones, another country's technology, or it's from something that we don't know. So it's not, I don't think that they have mentioned once alien spacecraft. Like, that's not something that's come up in conversation. So I feel like they are starting to take the points that you can get people to, you can get the normies to agree to. You know what I mean? Like, you can almost, you could sit down at dinner and you wouldn't sound like a crazy person to be like, it's not unthinkable to think there's a possibility that we're not alone.
Yeah.
We can all pretty much agree to that point. Oh, and hey, maybe we saw some stuff and we don't really know what it is. Not saying that it's aliens, but we saw some stuff we don't really like. These are easily agreeable points.
Yeah, as well as I think a lot of us are willing to admit that the government probably has technology that we don't understand or that we haven't seen yet. So there's that wild card as well.
Yeah. I mean, scientifically, I'm a moron, so I can only imagine what would be out there. And it's like you mentioned, it would be great to get the chance to talk to somebody who's actually viewed a radar and looked at radar cams and gun cams and all that kind of stuff and would know if this stuff is even unique. Because when you don't have a frame of reference, who even knows what this stuff really is?
Yeah, I'm in the unfortunate circumstance of having to take Tom DeLonge's word on this.
Yeah, I'm definitely, my ignorance in this area is definitely coming back to bite me in the butt for sure.
Yes.
So definitely make sure you guys stay tuned. On the next episode, we're going to be getting into the 1980s, actually. We're going back in time, folks. And this is going to be to an incident that happened near a nuclear power plant, if memory serves, in Rendlesham Forest. And it talks about how...
In what? Bless you.
Yeah, exactly. It's not in America. We'll go there.
Okay.
And essentially they talk about how there was a U.S. military base outside of the U.S. that had an event with a UFO that was seen. And actually they have a recording of it. Not a video, it's just an audio recording. But you can hear these guys actually in their moments of seeing this craft. And they're describing what's happening as it happens. So it's a little bit like the old radio show back in the day that they had that took place when they said that New Jersey was being
invaded.
War
of the Worlds?
War of the Worlds, yeah. It's a lot like that to an extent. Remember hearing the newspaper reporter guy, and he's talking about how it's coming out of the craft and this and that. It's a little bit...
the humanity.
Yeah. It's a little bit like that. Not as dramatic, obviously. But, I mean, you can sense the fear in this guy's voice. So they interview the guy that went out there, the ranking officer. We're going to delve into this a little bit because it's been around for so long, from the 1980s. And I think this is a good chance for you and I to kind of do what we had initially thought about doing with the show, where we would kind of pick an event and then delve into said event a bit and then present that and then our thoughts on it. But that's something that does, I mean, it's out there a lot now with a lot of, I mean, you and I think it's, you won't mind me mentioning, kind of got a lot of our inspiration from Astonishing Legends, which is another podcast you can find on iTunes that talks about a lot of the same stuff, which is basically two friends that discuss Astonishing Legends.
Yeah.
And it was your and I's vast interest in the show that really got us interested in trying to do something like this. And I know for myself, watching Nerdrotic on YouTube and Geeks and Gamers and some of those other guys, you really get to see people who are individuals getting to do things that they really love and appreciate. So it's cool getting the chance to kind of put energy and time into something that is fun for us, you know? So I think we're going to do that a little bit more before next week's episode for this 1980s event, because from my understanding, and this is the part I'm tasking you with to help me out, the story has changed over the years from what I've heard.
Oh, the old game of telephone, huh?
And there's another guy that was involved with this whole thing, but they don't talk to him in the Unidentified episode. And that was the guy, from my understanding, whose story has changed over the years. So there's a few other parts that are not thoroughly discussed in the episode, so I look forward to delving into that a little bit more. So we're not going to do just straightforward. We'll talk about the episode in its entirety, but we're going to have a little more things to add on next week as far as maybe some outside sources and things of that nature.
Got a lot to unpack, sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, and especially for another event that's been around for so long, like with Bob Lazar, something that's been talked about since the 80s. There's a lot of conjecture online and different things that I'm sure we can pull from that would be interesting for us to kind of at least add to the situation. Oh, and if you're interested in all of this, we mentioned again the Nimitz Encounters documentary that's on YouTube. It's about 30 minutes long that you can go and watch. So if you don't have the History Channel, you can see these videos for yourself, at least the Nimitz one. And they interview Commander Fravor. They go through the whole thing. It's free. It's on YouTube. Nimitz Encounters. Check that out. The other thing is there's an interview show with a guy, I believe, from the New York Post. Don't quote me on that. That's doing a show called The Basement, I think. It's either The Basement Interviews or The Basement. My apologies. But they're going through all of the same events, essentially, as Unidentified.
Okay. So just all this stuff that's recently been declassified.
Yeah, and I feel like this is also starting to lend a little bit more towards this possible, drip drop disclosure. That this is something that maybe is a little bit more of a coordinated thing, because now I'm seeing outside sources that are not specifically to the stars that are talking about this. But the weird part of it is that they're almost on the same schedule as the episodes are coming out in Unidentified.
It's a little suspect.
Like it's a coordinated effort almost.
Well, I'm really curious where all these people are going to go once Area 51 is stormed on September 20th.
Oh, yes. So glad you brought this up. So we'll get in. So basically that was really the end part of the episode, and we'll get into the questions here in just a second. But I feel like this is a really...
One thing that I would like to mention, I probably could have done this as a much better segue, but I'll keep it awkward. They interviewed Lieutenant Graves in hotel room number 51, and they showed it twice. They just vaguely show it. So there is that feeling that we're getting trolled a little here.
Yeah, there are times that the trolling seems to come hard. And that was funny to me because you had pointed that out to me about did you see they're in room 51? And I was like, really? And he's like, yep. It's like, really? Why do you have to do that? I don't know. I don't get it. But anyway.
The writers of this timeline have a very sick sense of humor.
Yeah. So I don't know about you folks out there, but if you're anything like me, it seems that my Facebook timeline has been aflutter with folks who are thinking it's a good idea to go storm Area 51.
They can't stop us all.
I don't know if this is a direct correlation with the Bob Lazar interview on Joe Rogan and the documentary that we talked about last week. Shameless plug, episode 3. Go back and listen. Or episode 2, rather. Go back and listen.
Right. Yeah. Is this life imitating art? Art imitating life?
Because I specifically saw Joe Rogan posted on his Twitter the other day, or it might have been today, that Bob Lazar does not want people to storm Area 51.
Is that his official statement?
That was his official statement.
It's hilarious.
So essentially, there's a Facebook group. That is kind of how it started, right?
Yeah, and I'm quoting here. It's a shit posting Facebook meme site.
Yeah.
There's no bones about it, and their claim is that they are going to storm Area 51 and Naruto run and then dodge bullets.
Yeah, so essentially, like, there's the funny part about this is that there's even like battle plans.
Yes.
Like if you go on the Facebook page, they literally have like an overhead GPS map, like Google Maps of Area 51, and then they have like groupings, and then your like said attack line, if you will, like that you're supposed to follow into Area 51, so that hopefully if we catch them from all sides, they can't stop us all at once.
Because all these Kyles will really participate in a coordinated effort.
Yeah, the Kyles and Karens are coming out in droves.
Leroy Jenkins.
I almost wish that this wasn't on Facebook. Maybe if it was on Reddit, it would stay more under the radar longer.
Yeah, but I mean, Reddit took off with it, and the memes are hilarious,
have been gold,
man. Yeah.
So my only other problem, really quick, before I get into the memes, if you're gonna do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why give them 2 months notice? Like, really? That's as far away as we're gonna. Why can't we do this in like 2 weeks?
Bro, you heard them. They can't stop us all. We'll give them all the time they need to prepare.
It's 2 weeks for them to move whatever's there out. You're going to take all this 52? Time. And all these people are going to die. And you're going to get in there and there's not going to be anything there. You gave them 2 months notice to move it. I don't know.
You're going to walk in and just echo.
Yeah. As soon as I saw the date and it was September, I was like, you gotta be effing kidding me. Like, really? But so there's like I think there's over 400,000 people that are on the group now.
The one count I saw recently was 800,000.
Wow. So it's gone up even since the last time I looked at it this morning.
Yeah. You know what was really fun too is that I came across this on Reddit and then I went on Facebook and looked it up so I could follow this shitstorm more closely. And when I found the site, you know how it shows you that like other friends that have liked it, there was a bunch of people that I know that had already said they were going to this thing.
I gotta imagine it's probably going to go up pretty high. I mean, I've saw a meme of Keanu Reeves and Chuck Norris both saying they were down. I can't imagine that any of these people are actually going to show up, though.
No.
You'll have like 6 people out there that'll get arrested and then it'll be over. If you want to check it out, you definitely can. It's on Facebook. It's not hard to find. What did you search to find it?
I think it was just Storm Area 51.
Storm
they
Area
can't
51.
Stop us all.
Yeah.
Maybe do a Google search and then click on the Facebook link.
And it's funny because, I mean, different people have been reporting that at times it's hard to get certain things to load on the site. So either they're getting an incredible amount of traffic or people are actually starting to take notice of this and maybe Facebook's trying to police it a bit now. So it'll be kind of interesting to see where that goes, to see if Facebook starts to, if they get rid of the group altogether, maybe, or if they don't allow people to post in it anymore, or what happens with that. Or if my favorite meme of this has been either way the internet wins. Either nobody shows up, we get memes. Everybody gets shot, we get memes. We find aliens, we get memes. Any way the internet wins.
It's fair. Yeah, I love it. I'm really excited, and I'm not expecting much disclosure wise, but this is going to be a grab the popcorn and watch how this unfolds.
If you had the means to get there, would you go?
I don't know, man. We can make this a business and it's a tax write-off.
Can I watch from a distance, preferably through the scope of my rifle?
I don't know if you should present it that way, but
no, look, hey, if anything, I'm a concerned citizen for one, and for two, if something starts coming out of that, like with the meme that you saw where this is all fun and games until Area 51 lets out Predator.
Yeah, Jesus.
I want to have space. I want to have big bullets. So I know if nothing else, I have a running chance.
And you can survive and make those memes that the internet needs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a job that I feel like is going to be needed, especially after, I mean, I'm not even kidding. The amount of memes that come up on my Facebook wall about the Storm Area 51 situation are never ending. But it's hilarious because
shot up so fast.
I've asked other people in my life, hey, do you know about this whole Area 51 thing? And I'm like, nah, what are you talking about? And I'll start mentioning it, and it's like you're opening Pandora's box of internet memes. They're all so amazing. So if you want to check it out, that one was really good. Or if you go to Joe Rogan's Twitter, and you find the Bob Lazar doesn't want you to go to Area 51 post, check out the comment sections. There is some fire in there that is amazing that I could probably never get away with saying on the internet. So all I have to say is I came across a meme that was so hilarious. I thought I saved it, and I found out later I didn't. It took me 20 minutes of going back through the comment section to find it again because it was that good.
I love when a meme like that is so dank and so rooted in the talk of the time that like a year or two later you're going through your photos and you're like, why did I save this? I know there's a good story here, but
yep.
Why did this stand the test of time?
I'm hoping that this has a popcorn-like finish. Because I mean, if nobody shows up, we'll get some great memes, but then it'll be basically about it. And I'm sure it will probably fall into the, nobody really remembers this happened sort of deal. But even if we just get some odd stories of just massive amounts of people getting arrested or whatever, like that'll still be
hop the fence.
Yeah, it'll still be something, I think that'll be, for the most part, wrapping up that discussion. We got our 4-part questions, and then we're going to wrap this episode up. So, question number 1, I know we went off on a little bit of a tangent there. Did you like episode 4 of Unidentified?
I did. It picked back up. There was some things that I found entertaining about it, like the pyramid scheme interview style. But at the same time, yes, I like the new videos, the new stories, and those kind of things.
Do you feel that the episode is presented in a way that makes you feel that these things are credible?
They keep showing the same footage and then backtrack a little on the story. So it was confusing to me, and I may have mentioned this already in this episode 3 wrap up. Like the timeline is just so tough to follow. And there's these 3 videos, and I thought all 3 of these took place in 2004 at the USS Nimitz, and now I'm finding out that 2 of them took place in 2015 on the East Coast. So it's already stretching my believability a little bit because now I'm having to try to keep up with your story.
And again, it's the evidence that's presented isn't necessarily unbelievable. It's the way in which they present it that just doesn't give it credibility in most instances. Like our continued theme of To the Stars Academy could have done a better job.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you feel that the episode made you feel like this is more or less of a, we'll call it government-induced disclosure or government-supported disclosure?
Guess so, because again, we have more officials and trained observers.
We're dealing with active duty people now.
Yes. I think that lends credibility. I hope that lends credibility.
You would like to think that someone who's in the military is credible, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to give them the benefit of the doubt there. And his
I don't know about Lieutenant McLovin. I don't know if I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. That guy's got a face that just says you lie. Other than that.
yeah, his full-on complete like eye twitch, blink, wink when he was talking about not wanting to go down that road was almost cringeworthy. It was hard to watch.
Yeah. Do you feel like you are ready to emotionally invest in the findings of the season so far? Do you feel like if you were to tell this to somebody who was, say, not a friend of yours, that you wouldn't feel that you're a bit of a Looney Tune for going through the events of these videos?
I don't know, because I guess the best part about this is it has the serialization of a sitcom. We're introduced to new characters every episode.
Yeah. And
those new characters introduce us to new people every episode.
They interact with characters we already know.
Yep. Yeah, they're branching out and expanding this web of people and characters, and it reeks of fiction.
Again,
but I hope it's nonfiction.
I don't know whether or not to take the Richard Dolan path of believe what you see with the footage, that actually happened. Don't necessarily hold all the stock in who's presenting it to you. Like, because a lot of people, obviously, I feel like the UFO community is pretty split on the To the Stars Academy. And I feel like a lot of people feel like there's not good motivations behind all of that, where I feel like others feel like that they don't care what that is. They're going to take disclosure however they get it.
True. Speaking of UFO community, we need to get into Dan Aykroyd at some point.
Oh, yes. It's any celebrities that get in real hard with the UFO community are always fun to talk about.
Because he has his own community and outreach program as well. So I'm sure he has some good documentaries and stuff that we could go through too. He's super into it.
I love these topics, and you and I have talked about before about how we both enjoy Ancient Aliens, but yet it's a lot of just popcorn stuff for us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sit back and enjoy. And I don't really know how much of this I'm going to believe, but it's a fun story to listen to. I think that there's parts of this that you can wholeheartedly wrap your arms around. Like a lot of the Graham Hancock stuff, I feel like it could be very credible in that there's, civilizations of people that existed previous to what we have documented and maybe even were helped by outside influences. You go down other ones with this where it's like, oh yeah, they're here. We have like 80 different kinds of aliens. I can even tell you about them. There's whites, there's blacks, there's grays, there's this, there's that. And it's like, all right, bro, like, I don't know how much I'm really willing to go down that road.
Right.
If you've enjoyed what you've listened to thus far, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Make sure you hit the little notification bell so they notify you when we post new videos. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud, and iTunes Beyond Explanation. Also, Escape the Mind Productions. You can also write us at escapethemindproductions@gmail.com. I want to thank the Soulless Samurai for joining me again today and continuing down our path of the unidentified on the History Channel. And
Thank you, B. Thank you, friends.
You're very welcome, sir. And I'm hoping again next week that we'll get into the 1980s incident in Rendlesham Forest, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. So again, thank you.
I'm excited for that one.
Yeah, I'm definitely super excited. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We love you. Have a great rest of your night.